The sovereign borders of the United States. We are sending a simple message. Turn back now, go back home. We will not let you in.
Now, today we have Team Fox coverage. RNC Chairwoman Ronna McDaniel standing by with analysis coming up in a moment here.
But first, let's go to Jonathan Seri. He's live in Ridgeland, Mississippi for us this morning. Jonathan.
Good morning, Sandra. Cindy Hyde-Smith is a Republican running in a red state, so common sense would suggest that she has an advantage. But she made some gaffes on the campaign trail, including joking about attending a public hanging. Well, President Trump was in state trying to shore up Republican support with rallies in Tupelo and Biloxi. He told reporters Hyde-Smith has apologized for her comments, and he warned his base what would happen if a Democrat were to win today's runoff.
We cannot allow Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer to erode that victory by winning the great state of Mississippi. That's not possible. Is that possible?
Amid the racial overtones in this election, nooses and signs referring to the state's history of lynchings appeared on the grounds of the Mississippi Capitol yesterday. They have been removed. Last night, Democrat Mike Espy attended a gospel event at a church in Jackson, although he's expected to do well among African-American voters in a state that has the highest percentage of black residents in the country. One Democratic strategist tells Fox News Espy must get more than 20% of the white vote in today's runoff in order to win.
I know I can't win only with black votes. That's never been where we are. We've got to get votes from everybody.
And we expect Mike Espy to cast his ballot at this church any minute now. And turnout here has been steady, despite the fact that we are just a little more than a day coming out of a long Thanksgiving holiday weekend, and also the fact that the temperature outside is pretty cold. Sandra, back to you.
Jonathan Seri, thanks for kicking things off for us this morning.
For more, let's bring in RNC Chairwoman Ronna McDaniel. Good morning and welcome back here in America's Newsroom. Nice to see you.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Do two visits the day before the vote tell us anything? I mean, is this closer than we have been led to believe, Ronna?
Well, I think every runoff or every special election is unique, and you're always worried about turnout coming off of a holiday. So we just don't want to take anything for granted. The president's approval is incredibly high in Mississippi. He won that state by double digits, and he's the best closer in the country. And bringing him in and going to both parts of Mississippi, to go to Tupelo and then to Biloxi, is just going to help energize that turnout for Cindy Hyde-Smith today.
Okay, maybe there's a different way of asking this question. I saw a poll yesterday. I think it was driven center-right that showed her up by 10 points. Are you worried in any sense that she could lose today?
I'm not. It all depends on turnout. It's really hard to poll in these special elections because you don't know who's going to turn out on these random dates that people don't typically vote on. So that's why we're not leaving anything for chance. The RNC's had 100 staff on the ground. We've made 1.5 million voter contacts. We'll be texting 1.2 million voters to get out and vote today. I mean, this is something that we just don't want to take for granted because the Senate is important. We need to expand that majority so the president can continue his agenda that's benefiting the American people and people of Mississippi.
What does 53 in the Senate mean?
Well, it gives breathing room. I think it incents other Democrats to come over and work with Republicans instead of being in lockstep as one group against the president. So it's an important number. It also is historical. You know, a president in that first midterm usually loses 3 Senate seats, and not enough has been made by the fact that we've taken out 4 Democrat incumbent senators. That he has expanded his margin in the Senate. If we keep Mississippi today, it's going to be a +2 margin. That is an excellent showing for a first-term midterm of a sitting president.
Let me take you back to last night on the immigration battle and the caravan that's gotten a lot of attention lately. Here from Mississippi, the president characterized it this way.
Every single day we are finding the illegal alien gang members and predators, and we are either throwing them the hell out of here, putting them in jail, or just plain getting them out of our country as nicely as possible.
Ronna, what is your sense about how this story is playing in Middle America? You live in Michigan. What are they saying?
Well, I think people are concerned about these caravans and these groups coming to our border. It seems to be never ending. There seems to be more people coming in this way. We need to address our immigration policy. It has been kicked down the road far too long. The president has taken a firm stance. He's been talking about this for 2 years. It's time for Democrats and Republicans to come together and solve a problem that's not going away, and we can't continue to push it down the road.
You're 2 weeks removed from losing about 38 seats in the U.S. House of Representatives. I know it's taken time to marinate a little bit, I think, perhaps soak in. Suburban women have turned against your party. How do you win them back over the next 2 years?
Well, we definitely need to get those voters back. I am one of them. I don't think we're a monolithic group, but as a suburban woman, I understand we care about jobs, the economy, health care, safety. We've got to share with those women what this administration has done to improve our economic prosperity, to bring more jobs to this country, taking on the opioid crisis, the child tax credit, all of those things. And I think the president's focused on how do we reach these voters to turn them out in 2020 and get him reelected, because our country's doing better and we need those voters back.
And you've talked a lot about the issues, too. And I'm just looking at a lot of these House races. They were decided by a couple hundred votes all across the country. And I'm wondering, in hindsight now, was the RNC, was the White House, was the party as focused as it should have been in order to keep those seats red?
Well, I'm going to say we did the most we've ever done in a midterm. And when you look at the historical trends, we're on target with the historical trends. And let's not forget, we had 44 retirements, including the Speaker of the House. So that makes it a lot harder to keep those seats when you have that many people leaving. It was an unprecedented level, and we shored up that House. We didn't have the losses like Obama had, 63 seats. Clinton, of course, we didn't want to lose the House. We're going to fight to get that back in 2020. But we also had historic gains in the Senate, which is often overlooked. And the president did help a lot of these House districts. He went to North Carolina. We won Holding, we won Harris, we won Budd, we won 3 seats there. He kept Andy Barr in play. I mean, all over the country where he campaigned, we won seats. We just couldn't get him everywhere. And that was the biggest issue. He's the most popular Republican, and he helps lift every candidate. It's going to be good to have him on the ballot in 2020.
Hope you come back. Ronna, thank you. Ronna McDaniel live with us today. Nice to see you. Thank you.
Thank you.
We got a lot of ground to cover the next couple of hours. Former 2016 Republican presidential candidate Carly Fiorina is here live. She's going to be our headliner next hour right here. I know you're looking forward to that. I am as well.
Excited to have her. Former presidential candidate, former CEO of Hewlett-Packard, businesswoman, pioneer in her field. So she can weigh in on just about everything.
Pretty good resume.
Topics today.
Cool.
Yeah. All right, Fox News alert on another big story. A new court filing shows special counsel Robert Mueller accusing former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort of violating his plea agreement by repeatedly lying to federal investigators in the Russia investigation. Defense lawyers are pushing back. Doug McElway's live at the White House with more on all of this. Doug, good morning to you.
Morning, Sandra. The Mueller team has been playing hardball with Paul Manafort ever since this process got underway, and it got just a little bit harder with yesterday's court filing. The special prosecutor's office alleging that Manafort repeatedly lied to Mueller's investigators and thereby broke the plea deal. Manafort's team denies the charges, saying that Manafort believes he has provided truthful information. But this means the 69-year-old Manafort, no young man, who's already been looking at 5 years in prison for the 2 charges in the plea deal, now faces potentially more hard time in the D.C. case, not to mention up to 10 years in jail in the Virginia case, which is in which he's going to be sentenced in February. Mueller has now asked D.C. Judge Amy Berman Jackson of the D.C. Circuit to set a new sentencing date for Mr. Manafort. Recall that she, too, has been playing hardball with Manafort. Last summer, she revoked Manafort's home detention and his ankle bracelet, putting him in pre-trial solitary confinement after she found out that Manafort had been trying to influence a trial witness through an encrypted messaging service. Well, this morning in a tweet, the president unleashed his fury at Manafort and his lack of interest in the Clinton campaign's part in this Russia collusion investigation. Quote, "The phony witch hunt continues, but Mueller and his gang of angry Dems are only looking at one side, not the other. Wait until it comes out how horribly and viciously they are treating people, ruining lives for them refusing to lie. Mueller is a conflicted prosecutor gone rogue." And then in part 2 of the tweet, Mueller is doing tremendous damage to our criminal justice system, where he's only looking at one side and not the other. And in part 3 of the tweet, he asks, where is the server? Let these terrible people go back to the Clinton Foundation and Justice Department. A lingering question is, where is this Mueller filing leading? Well, some analysts say it's leading closer to the president's inner circle, perhaps to the president himself. Other analysts suggest it's leading to exactly what the president has said all along, that the Mueller team is drilling a dry hole and that there is no Russia collusion. That's where we stand today. Sandra, back to you.
Doug McElway at the White House for us. Thank you. We're going to have much more on the Manafort plea deal fallout when we speak with Alan Dershowitz. He will join us later in the show. A lot to talk to him about.
Looking forward to it. Meanwhile, a lot more news to get to, including this. Nikki Haley, a stern rebuke after Russia opens fire on a U.S. ally.
What we witnessed this weekend is yet another reckless Russian escalation. It is an arrogant act that the international community must condemn and will never accept.
In the meantime, Ukraine voting to impose martial law as tensions escalate. All this ahead of a big meeting between President Trump and Vladimir Putin. So what should the U.S. do next with Vladimir Putin et al., Sandra?
Plus, the Trump administration not happy at all after General Motors announces thousands of job cuts. More on the message from the president to the company's CEO.
I was very tough. I spoke with her when
Close at least 5 plants, including some in the United States. The president urging the company's CEO to explore other options.
I was very tough. I spoke with her when I heard they were closing. And I said, you know, this country's done a lot for General Motors. You better get back in there soon. That's Ohio. And you better get back in there soon. So I think you're going to see something else happen there. But I'm not happy about it. Their car is not selling well. So they'll put something else, I have no doubt.
White House economic advisor Larry Kudlow met with GM CEO yesterday in a previously scheduled meeting. There's no word on exactly what was discussed there. We'll have a lot more on all of this when Charles Payne joins us next hour. He was here during the breaking news yesterday when this all played out. And Charles Payne was talking about just the lack of demand for some of those sedans that are
going to
made at those
trucks
plants.
more than cars. I think when the news broke, we just saw the headline, and it took us a couple hours to realize the extent of this. It's a big blow to some of these states. So we'll see what comes next, all right? In the meantime, there was this from yesterday. Watch.
We do not like what's happening either way. We don't like what's happening, and hopefully it'll get straightened out. I know Europe is not, they are not thrilled. They're working on it too. We're all working on it together.
That's President Trump from yesterday talking about the escalating tensions between Ukraine and Russia. It's a big deal. Watch this story. Lawmakers in Ukraine imposing martial law in parts of that country after a clash on the high seas with Moscow this weekend. Daniel Hoffman, former CIA station chief, Fox News contributor. Dan, how are you? And good morning to you. What's going on here? What's Putin up to?
Well, it's certainly the height of hypocrisy, but not surprising that the KGB operative in the Kremlin, Vladimir Putin, would violate international law and a bilateral treaty with Ukraine by firing upon and seizing Ukrainian vessels and then blaming Ukraine for an act of aggression.
Nikki Haley at the UN was not mincing words. Part of her statement when we were on the air from yesterday here in New York. Watch.
As President Trump said many times, the United States would welcome a normal relationship with Russia. But outlaw actions like this one continue to make that impossible.
A couple basic questions. Why does he continue to target Ukraine, do you believe?
I think at the heart of it is that what scares Vladimir Putin the most is democracy, especially in the former Soviet Union, whose collapse Putin famously said was the greatest geopolitical disaster of the 20th century. Ukraine has a sizable Russian-speaking population. They're committed to enhancing their relationship with the European Union and becoming a NATO member. I think that's an existential threat for Putin. And this latest move in the Azov Sea, I think, is designed really to strangle Ukraine's economy. That strait, the Kerch Strait, is an economic lifeline for Ukraine, and also important to support the besieged city of Mariupol in the Donbass region.
You know, it's an interesting point. You look at the map and the geography. This is a choke point. And you can see how, you know, just a few miles across at one point, and you can see why Putin annexed Crimea, and you can see why the conflict is so easy to create, Daniel.
Yeah, there's no question that Vladimir Putin is absolutely ratcheting up military aggression against Ukraine. And the Obama administration didn't take any steps to support Ukraine. The Trump administration has provided the Javelin anti-tank weapons, which I think was an important step. But now we need, at this upcoming G20 summit, for the president, I believe, to deliver a strong message of rebuke to Putin. And then I think we need to consider increased military and intelligence assistance to Ukraine so they can deter future Russian aggression. It's coming.
Now, let me come back to that. The Russian Foreign Ministry said this, said Kiev's policy, pursued in coordination with the United States and the European Union, the EU, that seeks to provoke a conflict with Russia in the waters of the Sea of Azov and the Black Sea is fraught with serious consequences. The Russian Federation will firmly curb any attempts to encroach on its sovereignty and security. Here is the ambassador from Ukraine as well talking about this. Watch.
We know that's action more important than just comments. And we are waiting for the very strong position of the United States, leadership of the United States. We still count, and I think it will continue, our military assistance to Ukraine.
Okay, so you mentioned it. Will Russia pay consequences? What will President Trump do in return?
I mean, let's first remember that Ukraine and Russia are at war. Russia illegally annexed Crimea. They've been funding and providing military support to separatists in the Donbass region. They've been attacking Ukraine with massive cyber attacks against Ukraine's power grid and their media and their finance and their government ministries. I think it's time for us to stand up for our ally and the principles we hold near and dear, like territorial integrity of a democratic state that's trying to defend themselves. This is certainly a challenge. I thought Ambassador Nikki Haley and Secretary Pompeo spoke eloquently yesterday, and it's over to the president now to hold Putin accountable at the G20 in collaboration with our NATO allies.
So more to come at the end of this week. We will look for that. Daniel Hoffman, thank you so much for your analysis today. Nice to see you.
Thank you.
We have breaking news out of Afghanistan at this hour. We're hearing a roadside bomb has killed 3 U.S. service members. We're going to have more details on this straight.
It's just outside of a shopping mall, 13 feet high. State television says 3 of them suffered minor injuries. 1 still in the hospital, but is expected to be okay. It looks like they hit the mark, right? I mean, that circle right there may have given a little bit of relief.
Didn't see what was coming. Glad they're okay.
From China, that is.
All right. Well, here's a Fox News alert for you. The U.S. military says 3 service members were killed today in Afghanistan when a roadside bomb exploded near Ghazni City. Lucas Tomlinson's live at the Pentagon for us this morning. Lucas, you've got more details on this for us now.
Sandra, the attack marks the deadliest against U.S. forces in Afghanistan this year. 3 American troops were killed, 3 wounded. A contractor, also an American, was also wounded in the notorious Taliban hotbed of Ghazni City, located less than 100 miles southwest of the capital, Kabul. Fierce fighting against the Taliban took place this summer in Ghazni. U.S. officials say the Americans were killed after their armored vehicle drove over the massive bomb buried under the road. The 4 wounded Americans were flown by helicopter to a U.S. military hospital. The Pentagon is withholding the names of those killed and wounded due to next of kin notifications, an especially tough time for families days after Thanksgiving during the holiday season. The news of more Americans killed in Afghanistan comes 2 days after an Army Ranger was killed battling al-Qaeda fighters in southwest Afghanistan near the border with Iran. Today, U.S. officials say Sergeant Leandro Jasso, Lando to his friends, was shot and killed accidentally by partnered Afghan allies during close quarters combat during an assault on a compound containing multiple al-Qaeda fighters. The body of the 25-year-old Sergeant Jasso from Leavenworth, Washington, returned to Dover Air Force Base last night. Jasso was part of the elite 75th Ranger Regiment within the Joint Special Operations Command. The decorated soldier was killed during his 3rd combat deployment to Afghanistan. Now, including today's attack, 12 Americans have now been killed in combat in Afghanistan this year, equal to the total of last year. Sandra.
Lucas Tomlinson at the Pentagon. Thank you.
Tough news there. There is new reaction now coming in as lawmakers weigh in on the escalating tensions at the southern border.
Building the border security wall and securing the southern border. We've seen what's happened the last couple of days. And that was the biggest promise Republicans made the voters in 2016. So we had better fight for that. We had better put it on the December 7th funding bill.
So the president and Republicans strongly pushing for border wall funding in an upcoming budget. But will it happen? We'll talk to a head of the Border Patrol Union coming up in a moment here.
Plus, it's all about the Benjamins. How an ATM glitch made it rain for a few lucky customers.
It's all about the Benjamins, baby. It's all about the Benjamins, baby.
Good morning, and a bit of a sell-off, but as Charles Payne will tell you, I mean, we're first minute of trading, anything can happen. But
I thought it was kind of interesting last night when the Wall Street Journal came out with this story about the tariffs, the interview they had with President Trump, and how are you going to factor that in if you've got a meeting with President Xi at the end of this week in Argentina? How's that going to go?
The General Motors news was very interesting as well, so we'll have all this market talk coming up next hour.
Are we doing okay on the border, folks? Not going to have it. You got to come into our country legally. We're right. We're not letting people into our country unless they come in legally, and we want people to come in through merit.
There was the message, President Trump sending a message to the migrant caravan yesterday. He was on the stump in Mississippi. This is from the border now. The Department of Homeland Security says 8,500 migrants have made it to Tijuana. We've got National Border Patrol Council President Brandon Judd on that in a moment. But first, live to the border, and Griff Jenkins in Tijuana. What's happening today, Griff? Good morning.
Hey, Bill. Well, the sun's just coming up here in Tijuana, and let me let you take a look at the sports center here. This is a Benito Juarez Sports Stadium that has the largest number of migrants of those 8,500 that Secretary Nielsen was telling us about. About 6,000, we believe, are in this actual stadium. In fact, we went inside a little earlier when people were sleeping to give you a look at just how tight these tents inside here are packed. The conditions are rough. We spoke to one of the migrants who had come out in the night walking around a little bit. He told me that food is getting a little scarce, water is getting scarce, and some people have been here for a week or longer. One of the interesting details we got from Secretary Nielsen yesterday in that statement was that they believe there's as many as 600 people with criminal history, and they also note, as I have observed so far this morning, a large majority of the folks that I am seeing here are like these guys right here. They're mostly male. You're not seeing the same number of women and children and families that we saw when I was with this caravan much in its earlier stages. We talked also, as you see and look around, there are houses here. There are Tijuanans that live here. We asked a gentleman going to work, I said, what do you think about this? He said, well, my heart goes out to them because they need help, but I don't want them here anymore. The U.S. and Mexico needs to get their act together politically and figure out something to do with these people. But for these folks inside here, this is the end of the road for them. And as we saw from that situation on Sunday, obviously the level of intensity has only risen here, and the Border Patrol officials on the other side clearly not going to tolerate another attempt like we saw on Sunday. We've learned Mexican officials say they deported about 98 of those folks arrested on this side of the border. Some 500 may have been identified. We'll find out what happens. A final note, Bill, I'll leave you with, and that is Pueblo Sin Fronteras, the largest organizing group assisting these people, has just put out a statement in the last hour where they basically are calling on the humanitarian organizations within Mexico to provide some shelter and protection for these migrants because they feel that they are at a higher risk now that the situation is elevated. Bill?
You can understand that. Thank you, Griff. Griff Jenkins, good reporting down there. Sandra's got some more now.
For more on all of this, let's bring in Brandon Judd, president of the National Border Patrol Council. Brandon, thank you for coming on the program this morning. Obviously, first up, we'd ask you for an update on the situation at the border. What can you tell us this morning?
Well, I'm grateful for the actions that our agents took. The way that they did it was very professional. The way they handled a very, very tough situation with hundreds of people rushing directly at them, throwing projectiles at them. They tried to de-escalate the situation through verbal commands. It didn't work to the point that they finally had to deploy tear gas to disperse the crowd. And they did it, again, not just for their safety only, but for the safety of the people that were in the crowd, that were being pushed to the front, that were being forced to do things that they didn't want to do. So I commend the agents. I'm an agent myself. I put on a uniform, but I commend them for doing what they did. They did it very well, and they did it very professionally.
And I know that you are saying that those agents got control of a very dangerous situation, is what you have called it. You're obviously defending the use of that tear gas. What do you say to critics who are responding to the images of women and children that were making their way to the border, some of them barefoot? How do you respond to those who say this was a use of force that may not have been necessary?
It absolutely was necessary. When you have grown males that are pushing women and children up to the front and using them to be able to throw their projectiles, they gave us absolutely no choice. And you have to take in the totality of the situation, look at where we lobbed the tear gas. We did not lob the tear gas at the women and children. We lobbed it away from the group to where it would be able to disperse to allow the women and children to get away. It was done very professionally and it was done very well, and there were absolutely no injuries.
Some of the latest that we are learning about the makeup of this caravan, 8,500 members of the caravan officially in Tijuana. They're mostly male, and about 90% of them would not qualify for asylum. Is that all accurate, and what more can you tell us about the makeup of this caravan?
It is accurate, and what's happening is they're gaming the system. They're thumbing their nose at the American public, the American government. They're going to cross the border illegally. They're not going to try to do it properly. If they were, they would present themselves at port of entries. They would not rush the border. But unfortunately, we have a history of dealing with these caravans, and the vast majority of them, their first act upon coming to the United States is an illegal act, and that sets the tone right there. And that just cannot be tolerated, and it can't happen. And
that continues to be the message from Kirstjen Nielsen, the Secretary of Homeland Security. She says the overwhelming majority of these individuals are not eligible for asylum in the U.S. under our laws. Historically, less than 10% of those who claim asylum from Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador are found eligible by a federal judge. Here's what the president had to say last night, and we knew we were going to hear from him. Here's what he said.
I do say, why are they there? I mean, I have to start off. First of all, the tear gas is a very minor form of the tear gas itself. It's very safe. But you really say, why is a parent running up into an area where they know the tear gas is forming and it's going to be formed, and they're running up with a child? You know, if you change the laws, you wouldn't be having this problem. And I think the funding of the wall right now is never looked better.
How does this play out for the president ginning support for his funding of the border wall?
Oh, I think this is really good because a picture is worth 1,000 words. And when the American public sees that these individuals are not following our laws, but in fact they're rushing our border, what it does is it galvanizes the public and it lets them know the situation that we're under, the situation that Border Patrol agents face. The president hit some very, very key points. One, Congress has to act. Two, they need to fund the wall so that we can build walls in strategic locations so that we don't have to face this situation and we can control the crossing points where it takes place. You know, he hit all the right points. He also talked about the tear gas. That tear gas has been certified as safe for all individuals, including children. And again, we do have to be careful with children, but it has been determined safe. And again, I will point out there were absolutely no injuries in this incident.
Brandon, that being said, this is not over, nowhere near. As this showdown continues, what more support are you going to be asking for at the border? What is needed as far as troops? Will more be heading that way?
I don't think that we're going to be getting any more troops, nor do I think that we need any more troops. The troops have been great as far as being our eyes, being our ears, watching out and looking what's happening and being able to deploy our agents to the right places. They're an absolute necessity for us, and I'm grateful that the president has deployed the troops, as have past presidents in the past. But this president has taken it further as far as giving us more resources on the border, and to our agents, that amounts to everything.
Brandon, finally, and we're going to have to leave it here, but if you could, you hear the frustration in your voice. You're so close to this, and we're all trying to get more information about what is happening there. If you could just leave us off with what you see as the most misunderstood point about what is happening there right now.
Well, I think the media, the mainstream media, is not being honest with the American public in the situation that we face. These individuals are trying to game the system. They're putting us in these situations, and then the mainstream media is vilifying our agents. That's wrong, and it needs to stop.
Brandon Judd, National Border Patrol Counsel, thank you for coming on the program this morning.
Thank you.
About 20 minutes now before the hour, a bit of an ATM glitch, leaving some bank customers hundreds of dollars richer today. Happened at a Bank America in Texas. Police say a customer withdrawing $20 got a $100 bill instead.
Well, that's nice.
Good markup. Of course, he posted about it on social media, and that drew a crowd to the same ATM. Two fights apparently broke out in line. Bank of America saying a vendor had incorrectly loaded $100 bills in place of $10 bills, and the customers that got the Benjamins will be able to keep them. That's cool.
Whoa.
Open up an account at Bank of America this afternoon.
Can you imagine the line that showed up after that?
Right on.
Wow.
Good PR.
All right, we've got this Fox News alert for you now. Voting underway in Mississippi's crucial runoff election after President Trump rallied support there for incumbent Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith. Will she become the 53rd Republican senator there? Plus, there is this.
We make a car, send it to China, there's a 25% tax. They make a car, send it to us, there's almost no tax.
Area, the National Weather Service saying 7 inches fell at O'Hare Airport. More than 1,400 flights canceled. Midway International Airport getting nearly 5 inches, leading to nearly 200 flight cancellations there alone.
Tough doing for that day. That's right. Special counsel Bob Mueller's new claims that Paul Manafort breached a plea deal by lying is drawing sharp reaction from the president, tweeting this. The phony witch hunt continues, but Mueller and his gang of angry Dems are only looking at one side, not the other. Wait until it comes out how horribly and viciously they are treating people, ruining lives for them, refusing to lie. Mueller is a conflicted prosecutor gone rogue, end tweet. Byron York, chief political correspondent, Washington Examiner, Fox News contributor. Byron, good to have you back today. Let's try and...
Good morning, Bill.
Let's dissect this in pieces now. And we're trying to read between the lines. What do you think is going on between Paul Manafort and Bob Mueller's team, Byron?
Hard to know. Remember that Paul Manafort was convicted of tax and fraud charges a few months ago. Then he was going to face a second trial, and that's when he made a plea deal with Robert Mueller. And, of course, the deal involved Paul Manafort cooperating with Robert Mueller. And a lot of observers at the time thought that, wow, now Paul Manafort's really going to spill the beans about Trump and Russia. Problem is, we never knew if he actually had any beans to spill about Trump and Russia, anything that Mueller didn't already know. Now we have Mueller in court papers saying Manafort has lied to us. This breaks the plea deal. We need to sentence him immediately, presumably sentence him harshly. Mueller could do all sorts of things. He could actually try to take Manafort to trial on these charges that he pled on. Manafort says he did not lie, that he has been telling the truth. The problem right now is we don't know what Manafort allegedly lied about. And until we do, we can't really tell if this is important in the Trump-Russia situation.
If indeed he did. You know, some have thought that, you know, if Manafort's lawyer said he was telling the truth, well, if it wasn't the truth, what does Bob Mueller's team know that Paul Manafort's team does not? Put that to the side for a moment, because you had a lot of other action around this story. George Papadopoulos reported to prison yesterday. Remember, a month ago, he came on Fox and said he wanted to withdraw his plea. Apparently, that went nowhere, and he reports to jail yesterday. Jerome Corsi is quoted this week as saying that he's not going to sign anything with Mueller's team because he did nothing wrong. I mean, just trying to weave a thread between this, Byron. As you state, it's hard to know.
Well, the thread is how little we know about this. Papadopoulos now serving a 14-day sentence, could not withdraw his plea. The bigger story on Papadopoulos is since his plea, he has come out and basically said that he was set up by U.S. law enforcement and intelligence agencies who were trying to penetrate the Trump campaign. That is basically his story. By the way, some people on Capitol Hill also believe that, but have had a hard time getting information out of the Justice Department and the FBI. On Jerome Corsi, that is a really weird story. You have Jerome Corsi, Roger Stone, and a comedian named Randy Credico. And there's this idea that Corsi knew in advance about the WikiLeaks leak of the Podesta emails. And what we do not know is whether Mueller actually thinks this is important, or is this a sideshow that he feels bound to investigate before finishing up his investigation?
There's a lot of action, I think we can admit to that, but whether it's moving the ball down the field to some sort of finish it's difficult to say. With regard to the acting AG, Matthew Whitaker, how would he fit into all of this if he goes forward?
Well, the important thing to remember about Whitaker is when the president appointed him acting attorney general, a lot of people said, "Wow, he's going to shut down the Mueller investigation or limit it or something like that." So as far as we know, he hasn't done anything as far as the Mueller investigation is concerned. But there is a big controversy over whether the Whitaker appointment was actually legal or not. There are a bunch of lawsuits in the courts right now with people claiming that the president did not have the authority to make Whitaker, who has never been confirmed to a big Justice Department job by the Senate, didn't have the authority to make him acting attorney general. The administration says, yes, the president did. There's a specific law, the Vacancy Act, that allows him to do so. And then the other thing they're saying is, wait a minute, this is just temporary anyway. The president will appoint a permanent or nominate a permanent attorney general soon, and this point will be moot.
Well, we need a flow chart. But we know we are 2 years burning down the road, and I don't know if it breaks today or if it's another month or beyond that. Andrew Napolitano said he does no longer think it's going to wrap in 2019, but it will go beyond that. Imagine that, Byron. Thanks for being on with us today. Our best to you. Byron York there in Alabama.
Thank you, Bill.
Thanks, Sandra.
Well, it was a success, a big win for NASA yesterday. The Mars InSight spacecraft landing on the red planet and sending back some stunning images of the landscape there. But first, a daring adventure caught on camera inside a California home as two sisters plot their great escape.